welcome to Shifters and Derailleurs, everybody. Okay. We're going to actually put derailleurs on a bicycle and put cables on it and make it basically shift. But as you can see here, this is probably from the 50s, I'm guessing, maybe 40s, 40, 50s. It's got this, fundamentally, this identical things that we've got on this derailleur. We've got a hanging point. It's spring-loaded, it's got a spring in it. This one's got a spring in it. We've got two pulleys, or jockey wheels, if you will. That's what they refer to them in the books. But it's got two pulleys, and we've got those two screws. And basically what those screws are is they're called limiter screws. So now we've got the derailleur. What's the shifter? Well, I've got all these shifters here, and I'll pass them around to you guys. Basically, the way these shifters work, like I said, it's a brute force device. Basically, once you have a cable attached to this thing, you literally are just grabbing a lever and pulling something or pushing something. Very simple. Okay, so now we've got our derailleurs, we've got our shifters, and then of course we've got our gear clusters. Now gear clusters being, the thing our chain rides on. Now I brought all these different ones in here just to kind of show you, different speeds and just to see stuff. This is an older one right here. This is a newer one here. You notice the differences. This one's completely attached. These are not. They work the identical same way. They refer to this as a freewheel. They refer to this as a cassette. We've got the shifter, we've got the derailleurs, we've got the cassettes, and the chains. Now, the chains, all these things are part of the drivetrain. Chains have changed a little bit over the years, but the way that they work is still identical. So, when it comes down to you're working on your own bicycle, and let's say if you have something that's 8-speed or less, let's say, you'll probably be able to use the same chain on all those. For the most part, so if your bike's 5-speed, 6-speed, 7-speed, 8-speed, when I say that, I'm referring to the amount of gears in the rear. We're going to start up here at the top of the shifter here. Taking apart shifters is usually not required to change a cable. This particular shifter does require that you pull it apart and take the top off of it to do. Every time I push this little guy right here, there's something on the outside here actually pushing that sinks into these little teeth, and it just goes up to the next one, drops into place. Up, up, up. See right here? There's one of our paws right there. This little guy right there. That's actually grabbing that gear and pushing it up to the next level. When I want to release, I just pull on here. The release is on the other side. I know that when I'm using this lever and pushing that forward like so, I'm putting tension on a cable. It's in a relaxed position when I pull it all the way back down to the stop. And that's where the head of this thing, I can basically feed a cable right through this thing and it'll actually run through it easily. You won't be able to take cables in and out of these shifters unless they're in the relaxed position. And what I'm going to do first is we've got our shifter, the release, all the way down. What I'm going to simply do is just take a cable and put it back through the way I got it out. The back of the bicycle here, we've got this thing called a derailleur hanger. Very simple. The derailleur hangs from the hanger. Now I'm going to do the rear first and then the front derailleur. The reason why I'm doing that is because there is you have to basically do it that way. You can't actually adjust the front derailleur without doing the rear first. Now I got my beautiful little Acera X derailleur here. I've got an Allen wrench. I'm going to get a little bit of grease here, and it's always nice to put a little bit of grease on threads. If you're gonna screw something into something, add a little bit of grease on there. Just a tiny bit is a good thing to do. I'm going to basically, as you can see here, there's a little stop on there, so I just can't screw this thing on into the derailleur. I have to actually mine this little screw on the back side here and have it above that little stop, because that little stop is meant to have that little screw set up against it. Now that's the one screw we haven't talked about yet. We talked about the limiter screws, and newer derailleurs nowadays actually have a spring screw. Now what the B-set screw is what it's called. The reason why that spring's on there is as you get to bigger cassette ranges, mega ranges, you'll even see mega written on some of them nowadays, you have to have that screw there, because otherwise once you get up and the limiters you get the derailleur all the way out into this point, your little pulleys will actually run into the teeth. And you got to keep those apart from one another. So by just simply having this little screw on the back here, there's a spring inside the top of this. By running it in, it actually will pull the derailleur out further. When you're down in these little gears, you're going high speed, fast. When you're going low, or slower speeds, you're up here in these gears. That would be the L. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to identify these in a derailleur. The top one is the H. I can see that because it's got the H on it. And then the L is on the lower. I can basically take these screws one at a time, and by turning them in and out, I can move this derailleur. I'm going to get this pulley or jockey wheel to be directly underneath the first gear, and then I'm going to actually use my brute force, and I'm going to push this derailleur out to the furthest point. Now, I can look at this right now and see that it's not going to be lined up with that outer one. I'm going to have to actually take the low side of this, take tension off of it, and it'll give me the ability to push it out even further. So, I've got kind of the high and the low set. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the front derailleur. And now all I'm going to do is actually anchor the front derailleur. The reason why I'm going to put the front derailleur on there is because not all front derailleurs have the ability to take them loose. This one's actually got a screw on it, and I can actually open the cage up. But as you can see, some derailleurs, this is all one piece. And basically, I need to have this on there to set the chain up. I don't know, I guess that's about a nickel and a penny. I will call it a nickel and a penny high. But we've got this on here now. I'm not going to go ahead and tighten it up just yet. And I'm just going to crimp this down, tighten it up. And you want to make sure that the blade of this little piece right here, when you're looking down straight on it, is actually parallel to the teeth. So I'm going to attach my chain. As you can see here, I looped it over the small gear, or our granny gear on the front crank, which is the small one. And I've got if you've got a pin on this thing, like I've got here that's pre-pressed, you have to loop it over the front. Don't try to feed it through the rear derailleur. You'll be spending 20 or 30 minutes trying to do that. A little pin that will prohibit you from doing so. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my chain and I'm going to feed it through. If you're not familiar with how to thread the chains through these things, look at another bicycle. Please do. So I'm going to basically feed this little chain up through the center here. There's a little tab back there that I have to set it in between. And then I'm going to pull it over the other jockey wheel or pulley. And I've got basically my chain partially attached here. Now I'm going to take my chain tool, and I'm going to put the two together here. And the chain's on, the front derailleur's on, the rear derailleur's on. I can really set my limiters up at this point. I've set up the high speed side, turning that little H. Now what I want to do now is I want to adjust the low speed side. Now how long do we need to make these cables is the question. So cables, you don't want to have bends in them. You want to have nice flowing curves. I'm just going to grab some housing, hold it up on the shifter, and then I'm going to take the cable and I'm going to imagine this thing coming down here and anchoring in the spot. And I can just pull a little, give a little. And the big thing to do is turn your handlebars. Turn them all the way, both directions. If things are binding up or things start kinking or it's pulling it downward, any of that stuff, you don't have enough cable or you have too much. As you can see here, I can turn this left, I can turn this right. My cable isn't bending right here at the end. It's not bending down there. I think my length is going to be, I'm guessing, right about something like that. Now when I think I got the right length, I don't generally cut that exact length. I give it just a little bit more. The reason why I give it a little more is, well, what if I didn't measure it right? I can always cut a little off. I can't add some to it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to, getting off track a little bit. Let me use my little trusty awl, my pick, and I'm ramming these in the ends. Like I said, the reason why we do this is because we don't want any added friction to the system by cables rubbing, coming in and out of the housing. I'm going to go ahead and take my cable now. I'm going to feed it through. sure our bike's shifted all the way down to the relaxed position. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull this little guy in, this little housing here. It went right in. Okay, so now I've got the top piece in. I still got another piece of, cut another piece of housing. I'm going to slide it through the bottom here, and actually what I should do before I go any further is to make sure that that's the right length. Am I happy with that length? Looking at it here, I'm actually, to be honest with you, this isn't going to be much of a problem at all. This actually looks pretty good. I could probably cut, you know, maybe a ½ inch to an inch off this if I wanted to. This isn't going to be too much cable though. You got to know which way your cables will go. Sometimes they might come across the top tube and then down the back like this. This particular one goes straight down and under the bottom bracket. There's a guide underneath there that you just simply feed the cable through. There's actually two guides side by side. One's going to be for the front derailleur, one's for the rear. Generally, the one to the inside closest to the crank, because the derailleur's on is going to be the one that's going to be for your rear derailleur. So I've got that fed through. Now I need another piece of housing cut. I'm thinking something right about there. Alright, so I'm going to give it a little bit extra just in case. Cut it. And there we go. It's no restriction at all. It fed right through. Set this back in its place. And now I think I'm going to be ready to actually set this guy up. This is our cinch point right here for the cable itself. Put a little bit of tension on that. But what I'm going to do now here is I'm going to test this thing out. I want to still, we haven't set up our actual high side or the low speed one yet. And how I do this is I'm just going to start shifting. Once you get upwards of the top, be careful when you go for that last shift, so just in case it wants to throw it over back behind that. But goodness gracious, that went straight up there. How do I test it? I just drop this thing all the way down to the beginning. You want to look at your other side, make sure the high side's still good. You're good. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3. 3 shifts. Don't matter how many gears you got in the back. 1, 2, 3. This should be on the 4th gear at this point. While you're on the 4th gear of the bicycle, this is where you might want to play with this just a little bit more. This is going to fine tune it perfectly. Just look straight up and down. If it needs a little bit more tension that way, you know, turn it that way. But you want this to be perfectly centered. Once you get the high side and the low side set, 1, 2, 3 shifts, and then that's how you actually can tell if your bike's going to shift right. So I've cut the other piece of housing identically to I did the right side. I've got it in the relaxed, the shifter in the relaxed position. I'm going to basically go down here, feed this guy underneath through the guide. And it's going to, this one's going to pull straight up through here. And I'm going to cinch the cable here. I'm not pulling real hard, I'm just adding basic tension to that. There's no slack in it. It's not like I'm setting a guitar up or anything though. You don't want to keep tightening, tightening, tightening. And I just cinch that down. And what I'm going to do now is I have the ability at this point. I can set my the low limiter screw for this now. And if you guys notice here, it's written on here for us, high and low. Okay, so at this point what I'm ready to do now is I'm ready to set the other limiter on here. And how am I going to do that? Well, I got to shift this bad boy. Pedal, there's 1 shift, and there's 2 shifts. Well, it went up. Now what I need to do is I need to drop this one in the rear, get that all the way down to the fastest. And now you can look here, and you want to have this thing close but not touching. And this is pretty much perfect right now. If I needed to turn it a little bit, I would turn it. I think the next step that I would do at this point is I would actually cut these cables and put ends on them. And I'm going to actually lube up the drivetrain. I think we're actually done with this.